Toxic sympathy. I'm starting to really believe that this world conspires to keep people enslaved mentally and energetically via toxic sympathy. And what do I mean by toxic sympathy? You know, or maybe better said, toxic forgiveness, this culture around forgiveness, forgive, forgive, everything is forgive. They beat you over the head with it, with, religion. They beat you over the head with it with pop psychology. You know, they try to sell to you some notion that you know unless you can continue to make yourself available to people, continue to keep yourself vulnerable to people, continue to try to look on the bright side of people. They sell you this notion that unless you can continue to do these things, you are a mature person or immature person. You are a backwards person. You are a person who, is petty. You are an angry, ugly person. You know, you're they try to make you feel as though you're some like vile beast, like you're like this, Ronin samurai, out there on some sort of vendetta. They really, you know, they really try to make you feel like unless you're giving until it hurts, right? Which is just a stupid saying. Give until it hurts, right? Unless you're giving until it hurts, that you're not a well-rounded person, or more specifically, that you don't have wisdom. They always tie forgiveness with wisdom. And I just think that's so interesting. I'm starting to see it as a game, as a hustle, you know? Because if you think about it, the only reason we as a people, as a society, haven't risen up and overthrown all the politicians and all the bankers and all the people who pull the puppet strings is toxic forgiveness, toxic sympathy. You know, Back in the old days, you had the storming of the Bastille, you had kings and queens, getting their head put in the guillotine because people got tired of their shit, you know. Um, I'm not saying that violence is the answer. That's not what this is about, or specifically violence should be the thing you resort to. But I think it really showed something. We got some of the best writing out of the Enlightenment. We got a lot of the best writing and a lot of the things that contributed to the hearts and minds of human culture from movements where people were not sitting there turning the other cheek, being, eternally sympathetic and providing eternal forgiveness. I don't think it's healthy. I think it's a way to keep people, as I said, like compliant, complacent. I think it's a way to almost make people self-correct, right? Like if I teach you that holding on to anger, not just anger just for the sake of it, but righteous anger. If I teach you that holding on to righteous anger and then doing something about it to affect a change, to get away from the person or to put that person down somehow, to keep them away from you. If I teach you, right, to not follow your instincts, which I don't think humans are meant here to be slaves or meant to be here to be, underfoot to other people. If I teach you to do that, then I can make you swallow a whole line of bullshit. I can make you excuse anything. I can make you still go to see, movies in the theaters when you know that most of these people involved in this industry are straight up child likers. You know what I'm saying? I have to be careful what I say on YouTube, because then they'll further shadow ban me. Because, and I'll just say this as an aside, like, share, and subscribe. I hate to say that generic shit, but, I went from having 400, 500 views to like 75 views to 95 views if I'm lucky. And as the message of this channel has gotten deeper, I've seen that. Now, some people may have taken issue with me getting political. Some people may take issue with my identity. That that's just going to be what it is. But, you know, I really do think we need to re-examine as a collective, as a species, this concept of forgiveness and these concepts surrounding sympathy and empathy. Because if you think about it, as I was saying, it's natural to get mad and it's natural to want to get even. It's natural, or it's just natural to get mad and want to not have anything to do with whatever produced the anger in you in the first place. People want to criticize, all of us for going no contact, you know, in this quote unquote trend of going no contact. People want to criticize us. People want to view it as, oh, you guys can't forgive. You guys are petty. You guys are stuck in the past. You guys are this. You guys are that. But if you compare the outcomes of our choices and our conclusions with the choices and conclusions of those who have chosen to keep these, bloodsuckers in their lives, who's doing better? Who's doing better? I could speak to my personal experience because I think that's the most powerful thing you can do. I'm sitting here with a decent career, okay, that can take me literally anywhere I want to go, living independently, okay, very low stress life, even with challenges. It's a low stress life. I keep a low overhead and I make decent money, okay. I have respect for myself and I have respect for others. 40 years old, and I don't say this to be whatever, I don't have a wrinkle in my face. When I compare and contrast it to my brother, who's 7 years my junior, okay, ironically he is a junior, he's 7 years my junior, I look at his face and he looks about 45. He's got the wrinkles all dug in because he's stuck with the narcissist. He bought her line, hook, line, and sinker. I think he saw, and we've had conversations that allude to the fact that he knows and saw that my mom, our mother, is toxic, is a user, is a self-centered person, is a very damaged person who refuses to get help in any real, sincere way. But he stood by her. He stuck with her. I'd say also out of selfish reasons, this is a person who doesn't want to grow up or doesn't mind living in their childhood bedroom because that's easier. It's easier than going out and finding a place. It's easier than going out and paying first and last. It's easier than being responsible for your own household. It's easier than feeding yourself. It's easier. It's an easy deal to, play baby boy till the end of time. But it's also infinitely harder because when this lady finally kicks the bucket, when our mother dies, you will have had no practice on how to live this life independently. And then, where will you be at that point? Lost at sea. But when I see him, he looks far beyond his years. He's fat. He used to be solid muscle. He's fat. He's tired. He's in a dead-end career, doing pest control. I mean, no offense to anybody out there. I don't know how far you can go with that unless you move up to being the guy that sends guys out to do the extermination. But, he's sitting around, spraying poisonous gas, crawling in, attics with cockroaches and rats and doing all this stuff. And he's doing all that to support himself, true. But he's also supporting this narc mother who never cared to see him succeed because his success would mean him moving on. And her need to keep him around, was far stronger than her need to mother him and push him out the nest, as all good mothers do. So who really fared well? The person who the non-forgiving, angry, horrible scapegoat who said, fuck you and everybody in this situation, I'm out? Or, was it the person with the endless forgiveness? I mean, I tell you, I go on Reddit and or any other forums where narcissism is discussed, specifically parental. That's more so what this channel is geared about. I don't really do, romantic narcissism. I think there's some pitfalls with that. I think it's easy to label anybody who dumps you or mistreats you a narcissist, but they're out there. Um, but I go on these Reddit forums and, I look at this stuff and I look at these people who are still on the fence about going no contact, or they're very low contact, or they're just waking up to narcissism, or blah, 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 blah. And, you know, you get to a point to where they start arguing with themselves, because they know they want to do it. They know they want to break free, but they feel all this guilt, okay? All this, extrinsic guilt that's thrust upon them by society because this person has the role of mom or dad. And because of that, they feel that they should supply this person with endless sympathy and forgiveness. And these people live terrible lives. They can't go anywhere. They can't do anything. They have panic attacks. They have anxiety attacks. They have sexual performance issues. They have issues finding and keeping a job. They have so many things. So many things that happen when you stay in close proximity to illness, to darkness, to a black hole. A narcissist is a black hole. Why should you care for a black hole? Why should you care for something that's going to suck all the light out of everything and entrap it forever? You know? But they live terrible lives. And this isn't something that's innate to them, because the fact that they're struggling with their current situation lets them know, and lets me know, and anybody who's observant enough to look at it know, that there is an inner voice that says, fuck all this. This is bad. You shouldn't have to go through all this. You shouldn't have to be subjected to, people putting you through this crap. You shouldn't have to be subjected to shit that feels bad. I'm not talking about going through things. I'm not talking about working hard to get a degree. I'm not talking about going to the gym and trying to get your max up. I'm not talking about, hanging in there with your husband or your wife and discussing things and going through the hard times. Okay? I'm not talking about anything that's just life shit. I'm talking about that extra stuff that we deal with, that we can easily say no to if only we listen to our inner voice. The world doesn't want you to do that, because again, the second everybody in the world starts seeing the game for what it is and starts trusting themselves and trusting their perception of the people around them and the intentions of the people around them, the second that happens, all this shit topples over. The politicians, as I said, the bankers, the celebrities that we've, bestowed God status to, who are out there doing horrible things to children because they have to do what they have to do to go along, to get along, to be a part of a toxic, horrible, demonic industry. We're going to chop all that down if we all get on the same accord and we all stand together and we fight against things that make no sense. It makes no sense to lie to the masses. It makes no sense to poison our air and our water and our food, okay, and the livestock that we eat. It makes no sense. It is evil. It makes no sense, to harm children. It makes no sense to destroy the financial possibilities of people with union busting and all the various things that the people are doing financially to make sure that the haves have and the have-nots will never have. It makes no sense. If we as a collective, embraced just embraced our inner voice that says, you know what, this is incorrect. Imagine the world we'd make. Imagine a world without toxic sympathy. Now, there are times and places where we have to give grace to people. But I think we do that for a limited time. I think we do that with children because they're still learning and growing. Their brain isn't even fully developed. I think we do that with those who are severely mentally ill because I can't imagine what it must feel like to be a schizophrenic or a person who we would call crazy. Must be like flying blind. Must be horrible. Okay, you might want to give grace to that person. Okay, and if you care enough about a person and they've given grace to you, you might want to just reciprocate that. But it's going to be on a one-to-one basis, meaning one thing for you, one thing for me. But if that scorecard starts to look a little bit too disproportionate, where I've given you grace all the way up to here about 20, 30 times, and you've given me that much grace, we're going to have to start rethinking the relationship. We're going to have to start rethinking, or I'm going to have to start rethinking how much I want to invest in you. And when it comes to a person like me, usually the answer is nothing. If we really think about the fact that, energy is infinite, but your energy in the little pocket of your body is not infinite, which is why you're going to die someday, which is why I'm going to die someday. Bearing that in mind, every time you turn the other cheek, every time you give to a person who does not deserve to be given to, you are depleting your energy and you're giving it to someone else. Someone who's clearly violated, someone who does not deserve it. So, this video is getting long, but I say all this to say, we as a collective, outside of narcissism or anything specific, we really need to rethink, our energy expenditure into whom we give our energy to. Because that's really what's hurting a lot of us. That's really why so many of these people are walking around 20 years old, overweight, tired, just sick because they're eating to deal with feelings. Because I would theorize we have so much obesity out here in these young kids. When I was 19, I didn't have a gut. I had a fucking six pack. Doing nothing. Wasn't playing sports anymore, wasn't doing anything. I had a six pack at 18. These kids walk around looking like water buffaloes. It's crazy. But I theorize, that these people are eating as a natural response to a loss of energy. Food is energy that you're putting in your body. They feel depleted. A lot of these people have been abused. A lot of these people have been touched inappropriately. And they're trying to get that energy back. And yet they're still going around these same people who perpetrated the abuse, be it verbal, physical, or as I said, inappropriate touching. And so they just eat, and they eat, and they eat, and they eat, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And everybody wonders why. It's because the world puts up with bullshit. It's because we haven't, stuck a ruler's head in the guillotine in a while. Just give that a thought.